right, we're live again. We just went through and added support for a Golang server to this checkout one-time payments Stripe sample. I'd like to go through and also add .NET. We don't have support for .NET in client and server. So if you look at client and server and you drill into the server here, we now have Go, Java, Node, PHP Slim, PHP sort of vanilla, I guess, Python and Ruby. And I'd like to add .NET. So I think it might be kind of fun to do that. So I have the repository already pulled down here. Let me just clean up some stuff that we are not using right now. So we've got just like a very simple RSpec test. So it's a Ruby test that will poke at our it'll poke at our server and just kind of like make sure that there's a couple of routes that return something that roughly looks like the right stuff. So the way that I wanted to solve this one is a little different. So I'm going to go into office hours and say Stripe samples list. So I'm using the Stripe CLI here, and you can list this and look for the developer office hours sample. So Stripe samples list type grep office. And in the office hours repository, I already have a .NET solution that I kind of like. So I'm going to say Stripe samples create developer office hours, and then I'm going to just say like COTP or something because I want to use this. I think I want to use this. So let's just see what it looks like. So in the server, it has like a full on .NET project. If I open server.solution here, I should get that in the full Visual Studios. It might take just a minute to fire up. Okay. And I think it's still thinking. So Visual Studios 2019 for Mac is what I'm using here. And I'm sure that we're going to need this to be bigger so you can see that. Okay, so then what I wanted to do was kind of walk through this solution and compare and make sure that we have all the right stuff. So in the solution here, we are given this startup.cs, program.cs, got some app settings. This is super small. All right, hopefully you can read that. It's not as pretty as Vim, but it'll do, and it'll work for it'll work for today and for working on .NET stuff. So, okay. So within the startup file here, we're pulling a bunch of stuff off of the environment variables, and for the one-time payment Stripe sample, we have. So if we look at Ruby, for instance. And in fact, is it in the root? Yeah, so in the root, we have .env.example, which shows us all the different all of the different environment variables that we'll need to set. So publishable key, webhook, static directory. So we need a price that's unique to this Stripe sample, and then payment methods. So over here, what I want to make sure that we're doing is we're pulling in the publishable key, Stripe key, webhook secret, and then also a price. And price. And what else do we want? We want the payment methods list. So payment methods, payment method types. Okay, so I've got to go back to my Stripe options is this injected config thing. So we'll need to add price here, and what was that last one? Payment method types, which is just it's like stored as a string, a comma separated string in the environment variable. So we may need to play around with that a little bit, but we'll see. Okay, so this again is some C# code. All right, so what do we want to do? We now let's say that we've got our environment variables are configured to inject with this Stripe options, which is great. We want to take a look at our controller, and we need a few things. So we already have a webhook route, but we also want a route. We need a post route for create checkout session, and we'll call this create checkout session. And we also need a get route for HTTP get for checkout session. That's just going to be retrieving the checkout session. So I'm going to call it get checkout session. And then finally, we need a super simple route for getting the config. So this one's just called config, and this is called get config. All right, so this is kind of like the rough shape of the endpoints that we want to add: a config endpoint, checkout session endpoint, create checkout session endpoint. So for reference, what I'm going to do is kind of like look at the Ruby code for this solution or for this sample, because Ruby is my favorite language. It is the language that I like. Okay, so we have the /get config, and all we're doing here is retrieving a price from the Stripe API and then returning this shape of JSON: public key, unit amount, and currency. One of those is from an environment variable. The other two are the result of fetching the price from the API. So we need to say, let's just add some comments here. So we want to say something like fetch price from the API. And then we want to return JSON that has, I just want to like make sure we get the shapes of these right. So public key, unit amount, and currency, right? And then I'm just going to make a little note here that this is like from the environment variables. And so I think what I want to do is add a model called like, it's just going to be like an empty class, right? So how do I add like a new file, empty file? Give me an empty file. Let's call this. So I want to build a model for the response for the config. So I'm going to say config response. I'm just going to call it config response.cs. And let's see, public class config response. And what does this thing have? It has the public string, what is it? Public key, and make that a getter and setter. And then we want one for the unit amount and one for the currency, right? Currency, yeah. Look, I wrote a :W because I wish I was in Vim. My brain thinks I'm in Vim, but I'm in Visual Studio for Mac, not Vim. All right, so what I'm going to do is I want to use Newtonsoft JSON to make sure this stuff is the right shape. So JSON property, we pass in public key. That's how we can like shape, kind of like make the key value in the JSON that's going to be returned. And then we want currency. So I'm just making a class purely for serializing that response. So then here, instead of returning an action result, I actually want to return a config response. And I'm going to say return new config response. And what does that look like? It looks like this. We want to say public key is equal to this.options.value.publishable key. Then we want to say unit amount, and that's going to be off of the price. So price.unit amount. We need to fetch the price. So let's do that. What does that look like? Stripe.com/doc/API/prices. That'll give us the API ref for prices. And we want to look at what it's like to retrieve a price in C# in .NET. And it looks like this. Okay, so we initialize a new instance of a price service, and then we pass in some price ID. Price service is giving us a little squiggly because we haven't imported Stripe yet. So we want to say, I think using, oh no, we are. Oh, you know what? I probably have a super old version of Stripe.net. So how do we fix that? Let's see. .NET remove package Stripe.net. And .NET add package Stripe.net. And I think, let's see what happens here. Are you happy? We are using Stripe. There we go. Cool. All right, so that worked. Now we want to say like var price is the result of calling service.get with a price ID. Again, this is coming from the environment variables. So this dot options dot value dot price. And then we're going to use that here. So price dot unit amount. Cool. And then the next one we wanted was the currency. And that'll be coming off of the price also. All right. So we are returning a new config response. And why are you sad? Ah, because the unit amount over here, I made it a string, but it is a int, no, long. Pretty sure that's what's up. We'll just make it long question mark, nullable long, so that it's not. Okay, so that's cool. And get config. Yeah, so let's make this. So it's an async. So we want to say like await that call. What? Oh, get async. That work? Cool. So because this is an async controller action, it was expecting that we're calling await somewhere. Because get async is, or yeah, because this is an API call that's going out to Stripe, we can throw await in front of it and change the name from get to get async. And this will use the async version of the retrieve method for a price. So now we'll get a price back. We're going to set the unit amount and currency here, and that should work. I don't know if this is going to fire up on the right port that I'm expecting in my tests. And we do have some errors. So how do I see those? Get checkout session, not all code paths, return a value. Cool. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit. Okay. So let's see. Well, actually, you know what? Let's just comment these out. Fire this thing back up and try to just get this config route passing. Okay. So what is up here? Lots of log messages. Seems promising. Cool. What do we got? What do we got? Oh, wow. Look at that. Listening on HTTPS localhost 4242. I want HTTP so that it matches my other stuff. So how does this work? Well, let's just open it up and see what it's doing for now. Okay, so it's showing the office hours sample template. That's totally fine. But that's not actually what I want. I want it to work on localhost 4242 without HTTPS because that's what we're doing for the other samples. And I'm trying to remember where we changed that so that it's running on secure. So let's see here. Okay, we've got our startup here. Are we forcing HTTPS somewhere? Yeah. All right. And then I thought there was something in our app settings that defined the port, but I'm not seeing that. So I'm going to stop and restart and see if I'm firing up now on just like plain old HTTP. I am not. Still secure. Okay, so what's going on? Launch settings. Here we go. The application URL should be local HTTP localhost 4242. I don't have an SSL port because I'm just running on 4242. And that is so that we match all the other samples, and we like some of the languages that we're using, some of the server languages that we're using don't have like easy support for SSL locally. So just to keep everything consistent, we want to fire up on just HTTP. And it looks like from the logs now and from this non-secure version, that's looking promising. So I think I think that might be working. Let's go run our test here. Again, this test is like completely outside of the servers and runs independent. All right, cool. We're getting a 500. Sweet. That's great. What is the 500 because of? Let's see. We're going to go to our server logs, and it was resource ID cannot be null or white space. You know what? I bet my environment variables again are wrong. So because those have API keys in them, I'm going to do that in a secret way that involves creating a new one of these bad boys and doing something off screen. So just give me a moment, bear with me. I'm going to go into the server directory and open it up and edit the .env file so that it has a price. And the price ID is going to be Stripe prices list type to JQ, and we want data 0.id. This will give us the first price in the list. So we want the ID from that price. And then we also want payment methods, and we'll just set that to card. Is there anything else that I'm missing here? I don't think so. Okay, so let's try restarting the server, because we change environment variables, like almost always got to restart that. And let's see here. Okay, looks like we're running. Let's run our test again. Okay. Another 500. Look in our server logs. What's going on now? No API key provided. Set your API key using this thing. All right, so all right, so new Stripe client. So I think I was just calling the price service directly without a client. And so I think I can pass in this .client into the price service. I think this will work to configure the price service with this specific Stripe client, and should allow me to make authenticated requests with that secret key that's being set there, rather than setting it kind of like globally. All right, let's run our test again. And we're still expecting that it fails, but we want it to get past this config. Cool. So we are now passing our first test. That's really good, and looks great. So now let's go add the second route here. The second route is to just retrieve a checkout session. It is a get route that receives the session ID as a query string argument, and then retrieves this checkout session and returns the entire thing as JSON. So here I can say checkout.session. Whoa. So I want to use Stripe checkout. And here I can just say session. Yeah. Okay. So we want to say something like var service is a new session service, and we're going to pass in the client. And then we want to get the session. So var session is await service dot get async, and we need to pass in the ID of the session, which is coming from the query string. And I'm trying to remember exactly how we do this in .NET. So I think we can say something just like string session ID here or something, but I'm not 100% sure. And then we want to just return that whole session. So I'm not 100% sure this is how this works, but let's stop it and start it and then give it a whirl. We can poke at this one directly with curl. So let's see, Stripe. Let's see, Stripe listen -j. I'm going to set up a listener and then trigger a checkout session so that we have a checkout session ID -e checkout.session.completed. This is purely just to get the ID of a checkout session. It's a little bit convoluted, but Stripe trigger checkout.session.completed. And then we should see that the data for the checkout session spit out here after that checkout session completed event fires. And then we get a checkout session ID, which we can play around with. So we want to say something like curl -x get to localhost 4242 / checkout session with the session ID equal to this checkout session ID. And we got back the JSON. Wow, that was super easy. Nice. Okay, cool. So that route is working as expected. Now let's go to the next route where we are going to actually create the checkout session. This is kind of like the meat and potatoes of the sample, of the Stripe sample. And first I want to refer back to our Ruby version. So create checkout session, we're pulling some data off of the request body. So we're going to need another model for doing some model binding on the incoming stuff. And then we create a checkout session that looks like this and just render back session ID just like that. So I'm going to need another model here called create checkout session request. And I just want like an empty file, create checkout session request. And let's see, did that make the right extension? Cool. All right, so using newtonsoft.json, public, we're gonna make a public class, create checkout session request, and I'm gonna have, what does it actually have? I don't know. Quantity, I think, and that's going to be a public. I'm not actually sure. Let's go take a look at Ruby and see what's coming in. So yeah, data quantity is the only thing that is inbound. Okay. So create checkout session request. We need to use this inside of the payments controller here. So we're going to say from body. I think it works like that, where we say from body, then we give it the model type, and then we say the name of the parameter, and then we can use that. And here, what we want to do is we also want to return something. So I might duplicate this. Can I duplicate? Copy, paste. Whoops. Copy, paste, rename. Probably faster just to create it. Okay, so create checkout session response. And what are we returning? We're returning the session ID. This session ID is the ID that's used to actually redirect on the front end. And okay, I can't remember what the convention is in .NET for the shape of the ID. Is it capital I, capital D, or just ID like that? And the response we want is to return a create checkout session response, which we can new up down here. And then session ID is going to be equal to the session.id that we create. So var service is a new session service. And this is going to, again, take in this .client. And now we want to like actually, let's see. So we need all the params for the options for creating the checkout session, and they have to match the params that we're passing in Ruby. So we want to say something like var options is a new checkout session create options, I think. Should be available in the stripe.checkout namespace. So if it's not, let's go look at stripe.net. So we go over here to github.com/stripe/stripe.net. And we're looking for session create. It's just session create options. Session create options. So I call it checkout session create options. Yeah, it's just session create options. Okay. And then we want to say var session is await service dot is it create post? Maybe it's not. Oh. Service dot create async, and then we pass in the options. Cool. And then this should return. This should make an API call and return a new instance of a checkout session, and then cannot convert type int to string. That should not be an integer. Why does it think it's an integer? Oh, yeah, because we want to await it. Yeah, there we go. It was so create async returns a task. We don't want the task. We want like the result of the task. So this, I believe this should work. Okay, so what are the options that we need to pass? A success URL, cancel URL, payment method types, mode, and a list of line items. So how do we match this with what we've got going on in Ruby? Well, the success URL is going to be the domain plus this. And then, so I'm just going to copy all of these and then paste it up here. So I have the Ruby version to reference here and here, and comment those out. Cool. Right. This is, okay, so env.domain is going to be available on the environment variables, but I can't remember if we actually set that up. So we'll call it domain. I don't like calling it domain because it's not the domain. It's like the root path for the URL, but we have it in a bunch of different samples. So we're kind of like, we're in it to win it with domain as the name there. And I don't want to confuse folks. So let's keep it the same. And maybe we can do a wide sweeping change later to update that. But so we're pulling domain off the environment variables, and we want to use that to construct this string that has success URL, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I can do something like this $, double quote. Yeah, cool. And then paste in our postfix thing. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so the curlies without any like prefix in .NET mean like string interpolation. So this .options.value.domain. I don't actually know if this is how you escape it or not. Oh my gosh, look how helpful that is. CS 8087, a curly brace character may only be escaped by doubling an interpolated string. So maybe it's this thing. Hard to say. We'll have to go play around with that. And then this one, I believe, is canceled. Okay, cool. So same stuff here. And then we want canceled. Okay. Payment method types. So in the sample, it has a payment method type or a payment methods environment variable, but that's not being used by the Ruby sample. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. I'm just going to keep it the same here and pass in card just as a, well, I think I have to do like new array of string. Do I have to do that? Like this? Or can I just pass an array? I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's see. Does it complain? Invalid term. Yeah. Okay. So new array of string. And that is going to be something like this, right? Maybe that works. The non-generic type array, is it array list? Something list? Yeah. Do I need to import system generic collections? Okay, that looks like it may have worked. Okay, mode is going to be payment, and line items is going to be a really fun one. This is where we define the list of line items. We want to say new session. Oh, cool. Look at that. Wow, that's fun. Okay, and then in here, we want to do a new one of these guys. And it has, what does this have? Okay, so in Ruby, we pass just a quantity and a price. So quantity is equal to the request quantity that's on the request. So we can say rec dot quantity. And then the price is coming out of the environment variable. So price is equal to this dot options dot value dot price. Should work, I think, maybe. Well, let's add some commas in case you want to add to that. You don't have to add those commas. Save you one character, save you a character typed there. Okay, hard to say if this is going to work. I think we got to just fire it up and maybe try it out with our automated test. It would be awesome if it worked straight off the bat. We'll see. Okay, let's run our test here. And okay, good. Unexpected token, Stripe exception, not a valid URL. Ooh, good. Great. Oh, you know what? Domain. All right, let's console log that. Console.writeLine. This.options.value.domain. And I want to say that I'm printing that out. So printing is how you log in C#. That's how you log in .NET. Console.writeLine. Okay. All right, we're spitting stuff out here at the bottom. Let's run our test again and see if we can get some sort of output down here that shows our domain. Printing domain and then nothing. Why not? Okay, so let's trace it back. Domain is obviously on config. We have domain here. And in our startup, I thought we were setting the domain based on this. Did I spell this right? D-O-M-A-I-N. Okay. And then I need to get a new one of these guys so I can come over here and check and make sure that's right. One moment. Domain, I never added it. Domain is equal to HTTP localhost 4242. Okay. All right, let's restart the server. Run our test. What have we got now? Okay, you specified payment mode, but passed a recurring price. Oh, you know what? Okay, so I said, so Stripe prices list type one time pipe to jq.data0.id. We just want the price ID for a one-time price, and I set the price ID in my environment variables to a recurring price, which doesn't work. Okay, trying again. Stop, start, run. Hey, we are passing tests. All right. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's also update. Okay, so there's a couple things that I noticed over here that we don't actually need. So in the models, I'm going to delete this one and this one and this one. If you're curious, we did make an episode of Stripe Developer Office Hours where we show like how to go from 0 to these Stripe samples, and show like how to basically start from scratch to build up to this exact .NET sample. So if you're curious, go check that out. All right, the other thing that I wanted to do is go back to my payments controller and check out the webhook handler. And let's see. So we are reading in the JSON directly from the body, reading to the end, and that looks good. We're parsing the Stripe event and ensuring that the Stripe signature verification is running. So that looks good. If the type is checkout session completed, it turns out that this is what we're using in the sample is checkout session completed, and that's the one we care about right now. So I'm just going to rock this and see what happens. I guess we can kind of like remove the debug statements that we had before. And that should be good to go. Sure. Yeah, we can leave that in there. There was also some comments in Ruby that I think I want to copy over. So let's just copy these here and see if they make sense for .NET. I think they do. So create a new checkout section for the order. Other optional parameters include billing address collection, customer email. Yeah, there's a whole bunch more other than that. So I definitely check out the full API reference for all the stuff that you can pass in. We have an episode coming up soon for Stripe Developer Office Hours where we'll go in super depth for the new checkout features. Really exciting stuff coming. So pumped to share that with you soon. All right, so back to our webhook handler. What I want to do is use Stripe Listen to test this webhook and make sure that it's firing as expected. So we can come over here and say Stripe Listen forward to localhost 4242/webhook. And events that happen on our Stripe account should be delivered to our local machine. So I can, again, say Stripe trigger checkout session completed. That'll kind of walk through the entire checkout flow. And we should get some events over here firing. It looks like we're getting 400s back. So what's going on here? Received an event with version 2019-05-16, but Stripe.NET 39.2.0 expects the new API version 2020-08-27. So what I can do is when I set up my listener, I think it's -- latest. I'm not 100% sure, but I think if I say -- latest, that should set up the webhook event endpoint on the latest version of the API, which the default version for the Stripe account that I'm testing with is one version back from the latest. And so it didn't work, but okay. Yeah, that was it. That was the answer there. So we are getting all of these and we are logging. Hey, look at that. We're logging session ID for the checkout session that just completed. So that is all looking awesome. All right, so now we have kind of a working server side, I think. At least it's passing the tests. It's passing our tests. So I'm going to kill the server and we want to move this. So rather than just being in like our COTP, whatever spot, we want to move it over to client and server inside of this directory. In the server directory, and we want to make a directory called .NET, and then I want to move. So let's see, office hours, COTP/star to here, and then remove the license from here, remove the README from here, remove the client from here. Move everything inside of server to here. I should have just moved just the server. Remove the server. Remove. I don't want to share my .env file. So just trying to make sure that I'm not accidentally leaking some keys. Kind of previewing that and making sure that is not happening. Okay, so where are we at here? 40 minutes. All right, so we're 40 minutes in. I think we're looking pretty good. Okay, so get status. All right, so we don't want all this stuff. We do not want all this stuff. We want to ignore a lot of this stuff. What do we want to ignore? Bin debug, obj debug. Okay. So and we want to update our dot get ignore so that we're ignoring those. Let me try to figure out what we did for billing in terms of the ignore for .NET. I think it might have been this business here. All right, so let's copy that and dump it up here. And then, yeah, okay. Cool. So now we're just adding Stripe options, payments controller, the config response, creating a checkout request and response, the launch settings, program app settings. Okay, so I think that's actually pretty good. All right, so what I wanted to do is like fire up the server and actually test it against the local client that's part of checkout one-time payments. So I want to go into just commit that. Adding .NET server. Or, yeah, CD server cd.net, and then open. Let's see. I only want to make sure. I want to make sure I'm only opening one of these, and just in case we edit it, and then it doesn't. Like, I don't want to edit the old version. I should have just kind of like moved it and deleted the old version. But let's see. What do we end up with here? Okay. So that is working. And I think I need to again copy my. Yep. So copy. Copy my .env file into the root of the .NET server version, and then fire that up. And I think I can also, yeah, I also need to change one more thing here so that the client is pointing at the right directory that lines up with the client for the shape of the repo when it's in sort of like dev mode like this. So I think I need to restart this. And okay, so this is not working as expected. So where is that actually being used? Static dir. Let's see. So in startup here, what do we have? We are not setting static dir there. Are we setting client somewhere? Let's see. Okay, static dir is being pulled out of this and used as the web root. So that should be going out and up. Server. Wait, did I name that wrong? No. Okay, so this is living in .NET. Up one is server. Then we have client, right? So let's go up, go up, up. Okay, so in client server, we have .NET. And then we have client, we have HTML. So this client HTML is where I want to be drilling into. So up and over, client HTTP. Client HTTP client. Oh, it's HTML, not HTTP. This again. Stop, start, and still nothing. Okay, what's going on here? So let's console. I have to do this after I load the environment variables. And let's see, let's say, stop, start. Let's see if we can see it. Console logged. Is that it? Static dir // client. Where is that coming from? .env. I'll show you that. If I show you that, you see my API keys. Oh my gosh. I'm editing the wrong one. All right. I said that was going to happen, and it totally happened. All right. So let's jump into here. Gosh. And all right, let's give this a whirl. And ta-da! Okay, so this is what the UI looks like. We're seeing the price there. That's expected. And if we click pay or buy or whatever, we're redirected to checkout. And this all looks as expected. Cool. Complete payment. And our webhook listener, did we stop it? We stopped it. Okay. So let's restart the demo. Now that we have our listener set up, and then just make sure that the webhook events are being delivered as expected. Okay, look at all those events. Very cool. Checkout session completed. All these are 200. Super cool. And then in the logs, we see the all of that was logged out as expected. So this is, I'm happy with this, and it's looking like a working Stripe sample. So we now have a server in .NET for this sample. I want to also edit the CLI.json to now include .NET over here. And okay, so something that, yeah, it's probably not interesting. Let's just, I was going to show how to do like git patch, but it doesn't make sense. So restore that one because we don't need it at all. And adding .NET server. I have a git alias for git commit no edit. Did that quite a bit. All right, so that's it. We've added a server for .NET for checkout one-time payments. I will let this one, I'll put this one up so that it can be reviewed by Dawn when she's back. And I think this should, I'm hoping this will be helpful for folks that are trying to integrate checkout. So I hope this was helpful for you, the viewer. If you're watching later, yeah, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at cjavdev. Would love to chat. Happy to help with your Stripe integration, whatever questions you have. Yeah, let me know if you have ideas too for other future things you want to see us work on. Today we did Go and .NET, but whatever. Yeah, down to play around with lots of different technologies. So I will leave this at that and say thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and attention. And yeah, I hope you have a great weekend. So see you next time.